Ben Fulton of Red Witch Analog Pedals, all the way from New Zealand, which is in the middle of nowhere in the South Pacific. I've known Ben a very long time. How long have I known you for? 20, 30 years?
I think we met each other at the Blue Note Jam Nights on a Tuesday in the late 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
90s, so that was 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 5 years ago. Yeah.
People do that all the time, right? They think of like the 70s as being 30 years ago.
Well,
it's really 50 years ago.
Well, it's crazy, that thing. Like, when I got into Led Zeppelin, it was 1990, and the band had finished 10 years beforehand. And then talking about Nirvana being 30 years ago, I was like, what? Yeah. Time is a very strange thing.
Isn't it? Yeah. So, I knew you first as a rock guitar player, and then, and you went through jazz school and did all that kind of stuff, but then kind of got really heavily into Jimmy Page and rock. I mean, you were always into that, but it became kind of more to the forefront, I think, figuring out who you are and what you do. And then the pedal empire that is today with Red Witch. Yeah.
Well, for me, it was kicking off with the rock thing, the Zeppelin thing, the Jimmy Page stuff, and then from there, sort of expanding out into interest in all sorts of different stuff, and then going to studying jazz guitar for 3 years. It took 3 years for me to work out that I'm not a jazz guitar player, and then actually from there, I went really deep on the solo acoustic thing, the Nick Drake, Burt Jansch stuff.
That's right.
When I was touring around doing that. And then sort of from that, strangely enough, was where the pedal thing kicked off, and it kicked off pretty quickly. It was sort of within sort of a few months I decided, yes, I was going to do this as a business. And the first pedal was the Moon Phaser. And I'd reached out to Zachary Vex, who I didn't know personally at the time, but I saw what he was doing, and his website at that time had these cool animations that would run, and I just thought what he was doing was really great. So I reached out to him and I said, look, I really think the stuff that you're making is really cool, great aesthetic, there's a great visual thing going on, and I'm looking at starting a pedal company. I'm not looking to copy you. I've got my own thing. Do you have any advice? And one of the things that he said was to reach out to a shop called True Tone in LA, which you would know.
Yep.
And so I did, and they took some on board, and it sort of kicked off from there, because that was, particularly at that time, was a real shock to the stars. So that kind of got my stuff into the hands of some big players quite early on, and of course, we're talking 23 years ago, there were a lot less people making guitar pedals then. And so it was very generous of Zach, and we ended up meeting a couple of years later at a NAMM show, and we've been friends ever sort of since. So
awesome.
That's where it sort of kicked off.
I remember going into True Tone Music, and I was chatting to the guy there, and they heard my Kiwi accent straight away, and they go, the first they thought I was Australian, as people do, the Kiwis and the Aussie thing, and then he said, do you know Ben Fulton? And I was like, of course I know Ben Fulton. And they had a bunch of your pedals in those glass displays, and I mean, pretty cool shop, isn't it?
It is a great shop.
Old school guitar pedal shop, and which largely don't exist now, right? I imagine a lot of your business now is online.
It's an interesting time, economically in a broader sense for any sort of retail, but certainly in the music product universe. I think with the pandemic and everyone buying things online, people suddenly, I imagine there are a lot of people that adopted that who perhaps hadn't done that beforehand. And so the industry is definitely changing.
Yeah. What I love about your stuff that you do, though, is you made a point of getting it out there into like the right kind of hands and making that stuff. And I remember some of the early days. You probably don't remember this, but I remember this very clearly. I was at Weta Guitars, that little shop in Newtown, and you came in with a little breadboard with some components on it,
yes.
And you said, "Can you try this?" And we plugged it into whatever Hori amp they had in Hori guitar, kind of made some sounds. I think it might have been the earliest of the choruses,
possibly, yeah.
Tremolo.
Well, Malcolm Packer is a Wellington music icon,
isn't he?
No, I haven't seen him in a couple of years, but he's got a really good heart, and he's always. A little rough around the edges, perhaps, for some people, particularly in this day and age. But he's always been very, very honest with musicians, I think. And the reason I'd go and see him is that, like, he certainly didn't hold back. You know, a lot of people, you know, that they'll sort of wax lyrical about how great they think something is, even if perhaps it's not. Whereas with Mel, you know, if he liked it, he'd tell you. And if he didn't, he certainly wouldn't hold back from it. So, you know, but that was a great shop. And I think he's still making some guitars and things. But that was really in the first sort of year or so of, you know, because I'd basically just designed things to the point that I liked them, and it's close to like a beta test as I've ever done, in that first year,
It's really cool, man, and I like that you were getting opinions. So I remember trying it, and you said, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Sounds great." Like I didn't really, I mean, from what I could, because as I said, I was using just whatever gear was lying around, and it was secondhand equipment that was just Mal was fixing up type stuff, you know, and but it showed to me then you had an initiative right from the beginning and an ambition with this stuff, right? And you saw. So how did you go from acoustic guitar, like the Paul Ibanez type thing that you did? Because I remember you went on the road with Paul Ibanez and
still good friends,
Yeah. And then you went from that to kind of going, well, I've got this vision of what guitar pedals can be, because that's quite a...
Well, I think it's you know, I tend to historically to kind of, you know, immerse myself in wherever the attention is directed. And in 2024, we all know that's, you know, this is the ADHD thing going on. But they didn't have a word for that. I was just like, I just hyperfixate on something or other, and I really did that with the guitar pedal thing. And there were a variety of things going on. So a dear friend of mine, James Rochester, who's great guitar player, great guitar maker, he and his wife run...
He worked at Weta as well for a while.
That's right, he did.
That's Roman.
And he and his wife have an amazing venue up in Hawke's Bay called Paisley Stage, one of the best venues in the country, if not the best. And he was doing sound for me on a rock band together, and I'd sold all my gear. And so my partner at the time, Rachel, bought me a Holden amplifier. Holden's a New Zealand-made valve amplifier. So there was Holden and Jansen were the two sort of big amp brands in the 60s and 70s in New Zealand. And it didn't work, so I needed to get it up and running, so I did that, and then decided to make some pedals, and the Moonphaser was the first thing, which was an original design, and people seemed to really gravitate towards it. And it just, I liked the idea of making guitar pedals. I always tinkered with electronics. When I finally decided that that's what I was going to do, I sort of immersed myself for about 6 months in every textbook that I could. You know, there wasn't a lot of stuff online back then.
I imagine,
you know, whereas now it's like anybody can
YouTube videos and tutorials and things like that, right, for everything you want to know.
There's a myriad of companies that do kits and things, so it's a much easier path. But I also think because of the fact there weren't huge resources available, that you know, there was a lot of finding things out sort of in an organic way, which definitely allowed things to, you know, go in directions that perhaps they wouldn't have gone had all of that information been there. And so that's where that sort of the idea and it's, you know, the concept is one that I've stuck with, that I knew from the outset I didn't want to make copies of things. I didn't want to do another Tube Screamer or another Fuzzface or anything, and that you know, the idea was to make stuff that sounds really great but offers some sounds that you can't get from anything else. And
smart,
well, it just makes it interesting, because the funny thing is that when you produce a product, the actual time, money and energy that's necessary to manufacture a product, whether it be an original design after that initial sort of conceptualization, once that's done, the time and effort and energy and money that it takes to manufacture a product that's a copy of something is exactly the same as something that's original. So for me, and there's no judgment on, you know, there's some amazing people doing amazing, you know, reimagining or reproductions of stuff that's no longer in production, which is fantastic, because there's a lot of great gear that's been produced that's no longer in production. But the idea of creating something that is new and different, you know, and it just, you know, it's that thing of designing things that you're not trying to make a product that everyone's going to like, because as guitar players, we're all very different. We all have different people who are, inspire us, and that's an enormously positive thing. And so for me, ultimately, the kind of the design brief I gave myself back then and had maintained it all the way through is, I just have to make stuff that I really like. I always know if it's good, because I'll be sitting down working on the prototype and I'll just be looking to test one thing, and half an hour will go by and I've just been jamming away on it, just getting lost in it. And that's, I think, the great thing with good gear is that it transcends just being an object or a tool, and that it actually becomes part of the creative process, and so that you are inspired to take your own creativity in directions that you wouldn't have considered had you not plugged into this thing or picked up that particular guitar, or it's just the biggest comparison I can make with guitar pedals is just like colors in a palette, as an artist.
Exactly.
And the way that some painters only need black ink on a white canvas, and they can say all they need to say, versus other painters who want hundreds and hundreds, or if not more, colors. It's the same thing with gear. Some guitar players will just plug a guitar into an amplifier and they'll say all they need to, they can convey what they want to express, and some of the greatest players on the planet have done that. Or other people who, someone like, say, the Edge, for instance, who just has such a plethora of different sounds that are integral and essential in him conveying the sound that he has in his head.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember a friend of mine telling me that he had a gig. What was the singer's name? Erykah Badu. Mm-hmm. He had an Erykah Badu gig, and his pedal board died, and he was like, crap. So he just got on with it and played clean into a Fender Twin or whatever the back line was. And afterwards she came over and she goes, "You sounded great." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Didn't sound like the record though, did it?" And that was kind of the key thing to him, was he could get through the gig, because sure, he's a good player, but that was Mark Lettieri, by the way. And but the thing is, like, that gave him the colours to make the album. That's what he was kind of looking for. And that's the way I look at it too. I mean, I'm a staunch user of the modelers, as you know, but I also use amps as well, and pedals, and sometimes I plug the pedal into the modeler and do that as well. And because to me, it's like they're colours, and there's something tactile about pedals that I love, whereas I don't enjoy screens all that much, and so.
Well, there's a simplicity to guitar pedals, and I remember in the early 90s buying a Digitech GSP7 and just thinking it was the fucking business, and it really wasn't. It was, but it's just a different approach. And so a company like Electro Harmonics latched onto something really smart when they released the POG. So the thing is that basically, the chip that they have inside the computer inside it is capable of doing so much more. But someone had the brilliant idea of, what if we just present it in a pedal format with a limited number of controls, and it does one thing really, really well, and it just makes it a lot simpler than staring at a tiny screen and patching through and so on. And like, some people love that. Some people, that's it's the best way, because there's so many different parameters. But for doing things on the fly, and so the contemporary modelers and so on, they'll obviously give you knobs and dials which you can change parameters on the fly. Again, they're all tools. They're all,
Exactly, that's the way I look at it. They're all tools, aren't they?
Ways, means of enabling you to convey what it is that you want to get out there.
Now, I can't help but notice the Crowther Audio hotcake pedal, right?
Represent.
I've got one up on there. I've got an old one sitting up in my pedal collection. And
the innovator, the OG of the boutique pedal wheel, Mr. Paul Crowther.
Now, I remember the one time, only one time I've ever met Paul was it was when John Schofield was here, and I was doing that tour with John, and I was looking after him. I wasn't playing, I was just looking after Sco, and Paul said to me, came to the venue and said, can I meet Sco? I'd like to show him this pedal. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll take you through. So I took him through, and he brought out one of the hotcakes, and I introduced him, and then he plugged it into Sco's rig at soundcheck, and Sco liked it, and he played some chords, and he goes, "Man, this thing's fantastic. Where can I get one?" And he goes, "Oh, they're available in shops," and then unplugs it and leaves.
Yeah.
And I was like, just give him one, like, but he didn't. And I was like, that's awesome. It was such a.
I so could see Paul doing that. Paul's a lovely human being, and we've been friends for
very clever guy.
For a long time. Yeah, great drummer. He was the first drummer in Split Ends. Great sound engineer. You know, when the Mutton Birds were, you know, it was a New Zealand band that was really big in the 90s and so on. Touring internationally, he was their sound engineer. But he's just a lovely guy, and he's very much a boffin. You know, he has an enormously deep knowledge of electronics and the design process. But he's also a musician as well. You know, so it's that good combination of things. And you know, they make the hotcakes the same way they always did. You know, his wife Jo assembles them, and they do batches each month, and you know, great product. And but you know, the first hotcakes came out, I think 76, 77, which is long before, you know, and it's an interesting thing, you know, in the world of we were at now with social media and self-promotion and everyone making claims to this, that, and half a dozen other things. You know, Paul's not someone that sort of has ever bothered too much with that sort of thing. He just quietly got on and
very
made these,
Kiwi, isn't he?
He's a very humble dude, but he's a remarkable. He's definitely a national treasure. Yeah. And in that boutique world, you know, he really was the forefather of that whole thing. He
paved the way, essentially, didn't he? Right, for a lot of other people to, like yourself, like, you know, he's the OG, right?
Exactly.
Doing it. And, it's an interesting kind of thing, isn't it? Because I think he named it Hotcake because the idea was they'll sell like hotcakes.
They were selling like hotcakes, yeah. So that's...
And because it was like he was early on. Would you say with Red Witch that because Red Witch started like quite early on in the whole boutique thing, right?
There was
make a difference, do you think?
Well, there were waves, you know. So in the 90s, you know, so Zach Vex had ZVX Effects, George Trips had Way Huge. There was a company, Love Tone, which were operating out of the UK, and there were a few others. We sort of kicked off around the same time as Keeley, and Pigtronic started, I think, 6 months after us. And then some years later, Earthquaker and JHS and so on. You know, when I started, there was maybe 20 people making pedals that were cool, you know. And now, you know, there's just thousands and thousands of people making guitar pedals, which is fine, you know.
It's unreal at the NAMM show, isn't it? Just to see how many pedal manufacturers are, and that's only the ones that are displayed there. Yeah. There could be some dude, like we were just talking about Owen Barry before with his, started getting into making some pedals and stuff. And I think one of the key things with it, and you hit on this before, is like, it's a different approach if you're a player, right? As opposed to someone who's just... you know, maybe has an electronics mind, because I know some people like that are kind of more electronics minded, but not necessarily players as such. Whereas someone like yourself, who, like, you get out and gig. We were talking about gigs earlier, and you've always got out. I remember seeing you. We used to come and sit in at the Blues Club and all kinds of things back in the day.
Well, I think the thing is, you know, I've always said this, that people either approach, you know, people that design pedals or other gear, but you're either coming to it as an engineer who plays a bit of guitar, or a guitarist who's learned some electronics and so on. And for me, it definitely identifies as a guitar player who's learned how to design electronics. And so the thing there is that it's my ear that has always decided what sounds good, you know. And I think if I've got anything that's sort of you know, a talent, it seems to be that what I think sounds good seems to resonate with players who are infinitely more capable than me, infinitely more famous. You know, some of the more iconic players on the planet seem to like the same sounds, which is, you know, that's advantageous when you're designing things. You know, and after doing it for 23, 24 years, it's that thing of you just you know, reaching a point and be like, yeah, that sounds cool. Other people will dig this.
And finding your niche within it too, because like you said before, if does the world need another Tube Screamer clone? Whereas if you're doing something that's original, all of a sudden that becomes your corner of the market because nobody else is doing it, right? And so,
well, the big thing with what I've done with Redwitch, because it's been through a number of iterations and so on, it got really sort of big, and there were other people involved, and then I bought the brand and the assets back in 2018, and sort of from the end of 2019 I've put a lot of time and energy into the limited edition stuff, and so really in the last sort of year I've been doing a new limited edition pedal every sort of 5 to 6 weeks, and that's really just because I really enjoy designing stuff. And so it's
when you say limited edition, you mean like you're doing like, I think you mentioned before that they're like 50.
Yeah, like
really limited. Like, not like Ibanez might do a limited edition Tube Screamer and they make 10,000 of them or something.
No, this is very much, and the stuff is all handmade, and so it's the last thing that just came out a week or two ago was the Solaria, which was an 8-stage operational transconductance amplifier phaser, and then before that I did the Magisteria, which was basically it tapped into that whole world of tape delay. And so the thing is, all of the stuff is handmade. It's all through-hole components. It's hand wired. It's it's taking it right back to the way that it used to be sort of done.
Built to last, right?
Yeah, and doing that on a mass sort of scale would be very challenging. But when you're only sort of doing less than 100 pieces. But the thing is, ultimately, as a creator, and it's that same thing as a player, some people, the thing that sort of drives you is the process of something new. What's new? And guitar players love new gear, and it's like this new thing. So for me, that's the main reason I've sort of done that. Is it's just like, when you do a mass production of something or other, there's a lot of other factors to take into consideration. There's a lot more money involved. It's a much bigger sort of thing to do. Whereas when you're doing a smaller number, it's and doing it quickly. And then there's artwork. There's obviously the electronic sort of design of stuff. There's the content that you're creating around it, the demo video and so on. It's a great way to spend your day. Yeah,
it's a hell of a lot of work. Speaking of which, I have this here. This is one of my most treasured pairs of pedals. I was telling Ben before. This is the Serafina Octave Fuzz that Ben made me.
I think that might have been the second of the limited edition pedals that I produced. When I started producing them, because the first was the Ophelia. And I think I
love the artwork. You were mentioning about the artwork. It's like it's simple, but VTF for the controls on the back. So it keeps it aesthetically. It's very pleasing. Do you know what I mean? And
well, that was the big thing. So for me, like I got to a point in 2019 where I was just sort of thinking, well, what do I want to do? I'd nearly 20 years at that stage of designing and running a pedal company, and I really had to think long and hard about what would I feel inspired to get up and create. And so the idea of having this design where the artwork takes center sort of stage, where there's an aesthetic combined with the sonic.
It's really important, isn't it? Like if you think of Zvex in that sense too, like he really was one of the first few people that I saw that really kind of took that on board. I've got the chat here too, people. If people have questions, let me know and I'll ask Ben.
The thing with Zach is that he always, he's had various people, but he'd employ artists to do because back when I started, everything was hand painted. Now they've got production models which aren't individually hand painted. I believe I'm right in saying. But you can still get the
hand painted if you want to pay more.
Yeah, exactly, which is super cool.
I had a box of rock, but I had the non-hand painted version. Same components, everything, but more simpler looking.
Yeah,
it worked fine.
Sounds great. I've got probably my favourite ZVX pedal is one that a guy who used to be the sort of head of sales had given me, and it's called the Lo-Fi Loop Junkie.
Oh yeah,
and it's just beautiful. It's it uses a chip, I believe I'm right in saying, out of an old answering machine, so it could just record for a very short period of time, and there's modulation, and it sounds wobbly and like a really wonky old tape machine, but it's that thing of having some sparkle. I don't know whether it's even sonically a sparkle or creatively, and I know for my own designs, it's that thing of you want to plug into it, you want to go, oh, there's that thing, and having done this for such a long time, you plug into most pedals and you're like, oh yeah, I know what's happening there. So that desire to try and create something that, pricks your ears up. So you're like, oh, that's
I love that too when pedals come about and people take them and do something different with them, or any gear really. But like you mentioned before about the POG pedal, the electro harmonics, and that I wonder if he even thought about the fact that people would use it for either a 12-string sound or that organ thing that it does, and that probably wasn't his intention. Same thing with the Steve Vai 7-string Universe guitar, right?
Yeah.
That kind of became like the metal guys, yet that probably wasn't his intention. So
that's it. That's the beauty of any kind of tool, is that using it in the way that it was intended is one path, but then also and there
being creative.
There are plenty of players out there whose whole thing is like getting the strangest sort of sounds out of stuff.
So our mutual buddy Lee Jackson sent me a message and said, ask Ben about the new Flash Megabucks soldering machine. I think he's keen to know what that's about.
So we just got, I posted on my personal Facebook page an image of a new soldering machine that we've got, and there was a chorus of different responses from...
Yeah, because you didn't say what it was,
no,
right?
No,
you said, I remember seeing that post, and you were like, what is this? And everyone was like...
I've got a lot of amusing friends, and so there were suggestions that it was a deep fryer for fish and chips, that it was a weird-looking Space Invaders machine.
That's cool.
There were all sorts of responses, but it's a thing for batch soldering stuff, which ties into... something that's coming out in January at a different direction. Really excited about it. Can't talk about it in any way, shape, or form. But
that machine, does it allow you to do things on a quicker process? I guess so. That's why you would get it, right?
It does. It's a larger scale version of something we've already sort of got. But it's really I've got it on board for something that's, as I say, coming out in January. We're partnering with someone, with a group that's pretty substantial, not a band group, an organisation, and I'm really excited. But there'll be more.
You've got a newsletter from there that you tell people about stuff, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so with the limited edition stuff that we do. Basically, if you're a subscriber to our newsletter, then you're always the first to get the first option before I share about it anywhere else.
And they sell out quick sometimes,
They do.
So you want to get on to that one. So Red Witch Analog Pedals, I think, is your full company name, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's the full company name is Red Witch Pedals.
Oh, Red Witch Pedals, is it? Okay.
Yeah. So it was Red Witch Analog Pedals, but the website's redwitchpedals.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Paddles for our American viewers. Pedals. This is always a joke.
And I always get hassled about my pronunciation on my YouTube stuff and that.
And we talk too fast too.
Yeah. So that's exciting, right? To have something like that allows you to do stuff. I remember you saying a while ago too that you were getting approached by, we're going back some time, but you were saying you were getting approached by companies about wanting you to design stuff for them. Are you still looking at? Is that still happening? Or
absolutely.
At the time
there's another company that I'm actually a business partner in called Seamoon, which is basically, it's sort of...
I thought you said something else just now.
No, I know you did. It's Seamoon Effects, which was a company in the 70s that had they really only had one product that was particularly exceptional. It was an envelope filter called a Funk Machine, and it was one of those paddles where it was one particular setting that sounded great. So in Seamoon, there is myself and a friend of mine, Jack, who has a distribution company in the US, and Neil Jason, who's a really iconic bass player, lovely guy. He's played on everything. He was in the Brecker Brothers band in the 70s. He played with John Lennon. He played with, he tours with Brian Ferry. He's one of those New York sort of guys. So the three of us decided to kick the Seamoon brand off again because it had disappeared. the end of the 70s. So I redesigned the funk machine as a first offering, so that it basically, the essence of it remained the same, but it was a lot more versatile. It was a lot more, you could use active basses in it. All of the controls, everywhere you set it, it works. You could do all sorts of things with it you couldn't do with the original. And now there's 4 pedals. There's going to be a 5th shortly. And one of the things which was super cool with that company was, because of Neil having the friends that he has and played on the albums that he has, we did the Sea Moon super sessions at the power station in New York last year.
Is that the one we had Steve Gadd playing drums?
That's
I saw
right.
that and I was like, oh my God, Ben. No,
so it was crazy.
Go all in, right?
It was crazy to be in a room. So it was me on guitar, and John McCurry was also on guitar, who's super nice guy. He was like Alice Cooper's guitarist, Cyndi Lauper's guitarist. You know the song Poison by Alice Cooper?
Yeah, right, of course.
So that guitar solo, that's John. So he was fantastic. So on bass, Neil Jason was on bass. Steve Gadd was on drums. Paul Schaefer was on keys.
That's right.
Randy Brecker was on trumpet. His wife was on sax. And we had Tom Bones Malone on trombone and so on. It was crazy. It was like I was the only guy there without a Grammy, but it was cool. We did a bunch of stuff.
They did Grammys for pedals though. Come on.
Well, it was everyone was playing through the Sea Moon stuff. So it's a long answer to your question, but so I have done other work for other people, and the thing which is nice about that is that. So to use Sea Moon as an example, the whole aesthetic of Sea Moon is so different to Red Witch. It's like playing a gig where you're kind of like your regular sort of thing is in a rock context, then going and doing a show where you're all acoustic. It's there's different challenges.
But that's exciting to do too, isn't it? Right? Because if you do the same thing all the time, I guess that's why if you're working with something like Sea Moon or another company like that you can do something that's outside of your normal warehouse, and you're not going to lose your normal audience that would.
Absolutely. And the thing with Sea Moon is that the pedals are, the primary, they're primarily intended for bass players. They do work great on guitar and they work great on horns and so on, because of course, that was the thing with that funk machine, is that the Brecker brothers, they used them on the horn section as well, and keys and so on. But it's just an interesting thing to be involved in creating designs within a different framework. Whereas with Red Witch, it's very much the framework that I've sort of created for it. To be doing something for with a different company has its own challenges and rewards.
So where do you see the future of pedals? Say, I don't know, 10 years from now, do you think there's going to be more kind of boutique type stuff, or do you think it's going to kind of move in some other direction, or where do you see it 10 years from now?
Well, I think probably the first question is where will we all be in 10 years time?
Yeah, right.
So,
replaced by computers.
Well,
no,
who knows? That's probably not something for a pedal chat conversation. But as far as I'm not sure. I'm curious. The music industry is in a very strange place,
isn't it? As an industry, it's fucked.
Yeah,
if I'm honest, it's really in a bad place, and maybe it's just partly Wellington, but
no, it's fascinating. My one of my kids, Lily, is just turned 23, bass player, has a great group called Shawboy, and so having a kid who's involved in music. And as a totally different generation to myself, there are still people who are passionate about music. There are still people who want to play, who are rehearsing, releasing albums, and so on. But there's a massive shift in the importance of music in that generation's life. I was chatting about it with a friend of mine who's a music journalist a few months ago. I'd been looking at Spotify and looking at like monthly listeners, and like The Weeknd had something like 4 times the number of monthly listeners as the Beatles, and and I was just astonished.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've thought about that a lot too. Because if you look at, I saw one of Rick Beato's videos, and he was talking about the top 10 songs of the time. They were all throwbacks, right? It was Dua Lipa, who's essentially doing disco
I've seen
of
that video,
that.
yeah.
And then there's The Weeknd. I mean, he sounds about as 90s as it could possibly be. And basically all the top ones were all throwbacks. And I wonder if people are just sick of the crap that's around now, and they want to go back to something that...
Well, the thing from the conversation with my friend, we were chatting about it, and he made because he's got a 12-year-old son, and he made the valid point that a lot of kids now, they're not wanting to grow up and be rock stars. They want to be influencers.
They want to be YouTubers. I know.
They want to be entrepreneurs.
Don't do it. It's a bad path.
It's they want those are the superheroes, the people who are in Lux Life and driving around in their Lamborghinis and so on.
But that's the way it's portrayed.
Yeah,
it's a higher Lamborghini, and they've got no money.
Yeah, Michelangelo Battio in 1986 promised to give us the keys to the Lamborghini. So I think there's a different priority. But then I was chatting about this with my friend Sage that works with us at Red Witch this morning, just about that, and that I do believe that music, it transcends. It has music has a spiritual component in it that transcends pretty much everything. It's a language that conveys emotion in a way that words can't, and I don't ever see it disappearing. But it's a strange scenario at the moment where you've got something like Spotify run by someone that is really clearly doesn't give a rat's ass about music. Is
basically evil.
He's a tech guy. He's come up with a brilliant tech thing, and he's made huge amounts of money at the cost of musicians, and we all
basically ruined the industry.
And we all use Spotify because it's super convenient. It's like, well done.
I know, I should. I mean, part of me is like, I just can't support it because it's like, I don't want to be part of the problem. I won't let them. None of my albums are on there that I can control. I won't use it. I won't let my daughter keeps asking, can I get Spotify? I'm like, no. It's like, I just can't do it. But then I'm also like, when I was learning to play, I would have loved to have had that kind of resource. I mean, what it was like in our day, to get music was tough.
Well, the funny thing was, I remember when I was at jazz school, the conservatorium and so on, actually finding recordings of the songs we were playing in combos that were really inspiring was not easy.
No, you had to go to the library, and they may not have had it, or they had limited.
When you're playing Autumn Leaves, and really your only experience of Autumn Leaves is a group of your combo playing it, it perhaps isn't as inspiring as hearing it played by the real icons.
Yeah. When people listen to things once, don't they? Right, like what you just mentioned about Autumn Leaves, they might go and find Autumn Leaves, listen to it once on YouTube, and then they moved on to the next version.
Yeah.
Instead of like what we did when we were growing up, which was you had to listen to it over and over and over again because it was all you had.
Yeah, it's that thing of there was a music industry, and you actually had to buy CDs or records and so on. But so in terms of music, seems to be in a strange spot right now. But I think But as a counterpoint to that, there's a huge number of people sitting, playing guitar on Instagram and TikTok and so on, and learning tunes and things. So there's obviously still a lot of people out there that are passionate about it.
Yeah.
Again, with pedals, be interesting to see. Venues. There are so many venues that are closing down because it's harder and harder, and people are far more happy just to stay at home and watch Netflix and order Uber Eats rather than go out. All of that's challenging. The kids that are playing on Instagram and TikTok and so on. It's like, well, why would they spend this money when they can just plug into a modeler or Logic?
People still want something real, don't they? And I think I can't help but think it's going to spring back. That people will go that way, and then like I just mentioned that I still buy pedals, and I have a pedal collection on the wall over there. I use my modeler as a tool. I use my amps as tools. But to me, there's something tactile about pedals, which is why I love them. And two, the entry point is not overly high. Like this here is a $4,000 something unit, whereas a pedal is like a Boss Overdrive is like $100.
Oh, for sure. And
or up to $500, $600, maybe $800 now for like really high-end pedals.
Well, I think the thing is that there's certainly a void for a next inspiring player. You had Hendrix, and Eddie Van Halen came along and blew everyone's sort of minds, and there are some great players out there right now, but it feels like everything throughout humanity's existence seems to have been cyclical. And so, you reach a point and then it enters a new era of something and someone does something different. And there is still some phenomenal music being made. A month or two ago, I was put on to Willow Smith's new album, which is
really good, isn't it?
Just extraordinary. Like it's so good. And, that's... the guy who produced it and played keys, Jean Baptiste, amazing. And like what's going on in there, the melodic stuff, the harmonic stuff.
The rhythmic stuff with the odd meter things and stuff, I just couldn't...
It's great. Well, the single was in 7/8, and it's like... But you don't really notice it, which is the key to anything, That's the real magic, I think, is that when your ear latches onto it and likes it and wants to hear it again, and isn't going, oh, that's an interesting meter, or, oh, those are some fascinating sort of... upper extensions that they're going for. But when you actually look at it and go, what's happening here? It's like, man, this is not... There's nothing generic about that, and I don't know where things will be. I think the thing is there'll still be people buying the gear that they resonate with, and I think for people of our generation, we grew up with our heroes using pedals, and so that's where we sort of tap into. But there's definitely, it feels like there is maybe space for that next step in guitar to come through, and what that will be, I don't know.
It's funny, I've had that a few times in my career, like people said, oh, why are you using pedals? Chris Kane doesn't use pedals, or this person doesn't use pedals, or that, or whatever, and I'm like, and they sound great, and I'm like, well, oh, okay, so Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan were wrong then. And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess. And I'm like, but to me, it's just like, use whatever gets the job done.
That's it.
And then that's kind of, and allows you to express the music in the way you want to express it. That's kind of the key.
And in a broader sort of view, it's that thing of what are people attempting to sort of do, and what in the end, playing music should be about feeling joy. And that could be if you're sitting in front of your screen recording videos in a nice comfy gaming chair, shredding through something or other. That might bring you joy. Now, you might not be able to transfer that onto stage. You might be able to run around and actually put on a show, but that's kind of irrelevant, It's like, it's about that thing of being able to go, well, this is what makes me happy. This is what I enjoy doing. And but they are very different sorts of things, like we were talking about with the amp modelers versus, there's a certain thing when you have a Marshall stack, 8 12-inch speakers, really frickin' loud, that is incredibly dangerous, and you're not going to get that from a modeler. But that's not what everyone wants. Not everybody wants to feel that, but there's a certain energy and an excitement that comes from that you
can't get any other way. I agree.
Exactly. And so in the end, like, whatever anybody is attracted to is cool, if that's what, your job is your own joy, so if you like this and this, then do those things, and other people, it might not be their bag, but at the end of the day, it's like, you gotta...
Well, we all do different music, don't we, too? Yeah. That's the other thing, like my work as a session musician is backing people, is doing theatre shows, is doing stuff, it's very different when I do Nick Granville artist, if you want to call it that, where I do my own music. That's very different from the working kind of musician stuff I do. and so therefore different tools, different things, and
Yeah.
it's, so what's happening for you musically? Obviously, you've got this. We were talking earlier about the Rage Against the Machine
Oh, yes.
tribute, but are you doing your excuse me, I've never known how to say it.
Phaeton, yes.
Phaeton?
So just about the Rage Against the Machine tribute, it's a band called Dave Against the Machine. I'm not playing guitar in it, I'm playing drums in it.
I love that.
And it's like literally we were just talking about this, the thing of like having played guitar for 35 years or more or whatever it is, there's sort of expectations, whereas playing an instrument that's not your main instrument, suddenly it's like the goal for me is credibility. And I've always said, what I lack in talent, I make up for in volume, and on the drums, and so that's been fantastic. Again, that whole notion of finding joy. It's like at the end of the day, you
do it because it's fun.
You dream, your aspirations as a young musician and so on of this and that and fame and all that sort of thing. We've only got a very limited time on the planet, and if you're doing something that genuinely makes you smile and have a good time.
That's what it's about.
Yeah, so that's...
I love that there's someone called Dave in the band.
Yeah.
Dave Against the Machine isn't just like a hypothetical person.
No, Dave is real. Dave and I have been friends since we were at school about 13 or so, and it was his idea to put the band together, and that friend of mine, James Rochester, that I mentioned, who's the guitar maker and guitarist, he was the one who came up with the name.
Brilliant.
He was mixing a gig at his venue, and I was chatting to him, and he just it came out. I'm like, oh, it's got to be that.
Yeah.
So that's been great. That's just really enjoyable. And then playing wise, the Phaeton thing. So there's one of my best mates is a fantastic guitar player, Jeff Boyle. Plays in the group Jacob. He's a really phenomenal player and a
very creative use of pedals. And
yeah,
stuff. It's like amazing what he does.
Kind of created their own genre that's sort of been adopted by a lot of people. But Jeff's a fantastic human being and an amazing musician, and he's been doing a little bit of solo stuff. And so we've sort of talked about with a couple of other people we know, maybe putting a tour or something or some shows together. So I haven't done the Phaeton thing for a few years, but yeah, that was drawing a little of the solo acoustic thing with open tunings, but also probably my favorite jazz guitar player would be Bill Frisell.
Bill Frisell, yeah.
And the sensitivity in which he plays, I certainly don't have that harmonic vocabulary that he has, but just the approaching it with that intent and the vulnerability and the tightrope walking of playing solo is there was a DVD that came out probably more than 10 years ago now, where he's in it looks like a church, and he's playing a bunch of tunes by himself, and he's got a couple of Fender Deluxe reverbs. And when he came through here, you were obviously at the workshop that he ran and so on.
I didn't see the workshop. We were on tour with the Fox band, and we it was really unfortunate because I managed to see the concert.
Yeah.
But we flew in. I had an hour between getting in and going to the concert. I went straight to the concert, and I was so tired that I spent the whole gig like this, trying to hold my eyes open. And he played so mellow, and the whole time, and I'm just like, oh, this is killing me. I really want to enjoy this, but I just didn't.
Yeah, no, it was a great gig,
but it was just me because I was so tired.
Yeah. Well, he did a workshop the day beforehand up at Vic, and that was that was quite an extraordinary experience, having loved his music for such a long period of time. And, and I brought some paddles along with me. And after the workshop, I sort of popped up to him and introduced myself and said, your music's meant an enormous amount to me for a long, long time. And I have this company, I make these things, and I'd just like to give you these. And he seemed to be kind of incredulous that I was giving it. He was like, to keep. I'm like, absolutely. And then 2 weeks later, I got this lovely email from him. They were in Japan, about to head home. He said, I just want to let you know that I used pretty much all the pedals at the Wellington show and have been using them every night since. So
brilliant.
They sound really cool. So I've always had a lot of love for Bill Frisell's music. So that was quite an influence in the Phaeton thing. And it's that thing of challenging yourself. It's.
I think it's very smart how you've done that. How you've got that in your pedals, because I remember Andy Summers had some. The chorus maybe, and
the chorus
the
and the
Edge, and Steve Vai. I saw Steve Vai's cabinet pedal cabinet where he had them on display, and Satriani and all these people. I mean, it's a smart business thing, isn't it, right? Because you put it in the hands of those players, all of a sudden they take it, it grows, it shows.
Well, the crazy thing is with a lot of those people, they bought them. You know, so Andy Summers, you know, I think bought 5 of each of them. And I was told by a friend that was working at the shop, he rang me and said, I just thought you might want to know that Andy Summers has bought, you know, 5 of each of them.
Was that True Tone?
Yeah, it was True Tone. And for a project that's happening next year. And I was like, well, that's cool. And then, of course, it was announced that the police were reforming. And then what was really crazy about that situation was that Guitar Player did a huge spread on them. And a really in-depth look at the gear, including 3 songs going through exactly what was being switched in and switched out. So for me, like when I designed the Empress chorus, I'm not actually a huge fan of chorus, but I do love the chorus sounds that appear on the Police record. So I was designing it playing versions of Police songs through it. So for him to grab it, and then it appeared in this listing of what he was using. It's there in every song, was the only chorus pedal that he was using. And then the Deluxe Moon Phaser, he used in different songs, but there was one bit in the song Can't Stand Losing You after the breakdown where it goes into sort of power chord sort of thing. And it was around about the time that magazine came out that they finished the Live 8 concert, which was in front of like 1 billion people. And I remember being in our lounge watching it on the little TV as it was live, and they played Can't Stand Losing You, and suddenly I hear the swirling sound, because the Moon Phaser offers a thing called tremor phase, which no one else had done at that stage. It was a new sound where basically the pulse of the amplitude of the tremolo occurs at the same time as the frequency modulation of the phasing, so it's sort of a swirly sort of mushing sort of sound. Anyway, it was in the magazine a few weeks later watching this thing, and there he goes into it, and it's like, well, that was pretty out of it, you know.
That's mind-blowing, isn't it, when you think about it, right? Because I imagine when you design these things, you probably have no idea that that's where that's going to go, right? But
well, that was early days. That was 2006, you know. So
when did you start Red Witch?
Sort of 2001, 2002 was when it sort of the kind of concept sort of started coming together.
Almost 25 years, right? Is there going to be a 25th anniversary?
There should be
pedal collection or something?
Who knows? But it's
that's amazing. 25 years when you think about it, right?
Yeah,
we're not that old, people.
No,
I mean we were old-ish. But
well, I started Red Witch when I was 9, so you know.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And that makes you 22 now.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly right. And I think I'm older than you.
I think you are, but only by a smidge.
Yeah.
But that's amazing, right? Like the bulk of your life has been doing these pedals, right?
Yeah.
Given our age, like, or at least half of your life, I'd say, probably if you're the same age than that.
Yeah.
That I am. That's crazy, isn't it? That you've dedicated that time to doing this, and then it's growing into, like, when you started it, you probably didn't have this vision of where it is now, right?
There was no vision. It was literally like, I enjoy this, so I'm going to do this.
That's been my whole MO about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, even this YouTube stuff that I do now, I don't care about views. I don't care about any of that stuff. If people dig it, they'll watch it. Those that are into, like, I just do it because I enjoy it. And as soon as I stop enjoying it, that's when I stop doing it.
Yeah. Well,
right?
you know, as I said before, we're only here for a really short period of time. And, you know, the inevitability of existence is that things will come along that will be really hard and difficult to deal with. You know, people die and tragedies occur and shitness exists. And we can't control that. But, you know, it definitely, where possible, embrace the things that bring you joy, that, you know.
So what have you got? What have you got coming out around the corner? Have you got anything that you can talk about? I know you've said there's some stuff.
Yeah, there's a big thing coming in January, which I can't talk about.
But is there anything before then, or
yeah? Well, there's the limited edition stuff. I can't actually say what it is. It's all, you know. But there in about 3 weeks' time, there's going to be a new, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time, there's going to be a new limited edition pedal that's available. There's some big plans for the coming year, you know. So this first thing that will happen, and it's looking like it'll be happening in January, and then from there, some, you know. So
January will be the release, or you're going to do the thing?
January will be the release.
Okay,
is the plan. So it's definitely I'm pretty thrilled by how it's all coming together.
Oh man, that's so exciting. So where can people find your stuff? It's at redwitchpedals.com.
Yeah, redwitchpedals.com.
And you've got Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, I assume. TikTok,
Yes.
do you do?
I do not do TikTok.
Good, me neither. I hate that kind of crap.
I'm 48 years old. I do not do TikTok.
Yeah, so you are about the same age as me. I'm
Yeah.
45, going on 46. It's funny, isn't it? Because I've had people say to me, "Oh, you have to do TikTok." It's like we're all these. I'm like, no, no, really, I don't.
Yeah.
you do what you do, right? And
That's the critical
you do
thing.
what fits to what you want to do, and that's that. So, but the website's probably the best place to go.
Yeah.
Go and sign up for the newsletter because that gets you access to the exclusive stuff first, right? Go and follow Ben on Instagram. I'm sure he's. You do have an Instagram. I know
We
that.
do
'cause I
have an
follow your
Instagram. We do have a Facebook. Yes.
Yep. Go and follow him. And thanks so much for being part of this.
Hey,
It's been
thanks for
an
having me.
awesome chat to come and talk about this, and we'll have to have you back again to come and
Nice.
talk stuff. And yeah, that'd be awesome. Cheers, guys.
Cheerio.